Hey YouTube, I'm doing outstanding. Welcome to another podcast. This time is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be reading a story that I wrote in probably about 7th grade. It's a Minecraft fan fiction. And it's just bad. So I'm going to start off by reading the intro and day 1, because I separated it into days. Noah will read day 2, Steven will read day 3, and so on. That is, if you guys are okay with reading. So.
Oh, yeah.
The True Story of Steve Tfarcenim by Sebastian Croft. The world is dark. It's a void. Pure nothingness. Then, out of nowhere, grass, dirt, stone, water, lava. Faster now. Everything is showing up. Sheep, pigs, zombies, cows, everything. Finally, light, time, weather, flowers, trees. The world has begun. Day 1. Within the newly created forest, a man suddenly awoke. He knew nothing about who he was, what he was, or really much of anything other than movement. He stood up and glanced around the area, observing everything that takes place within sight or hearing. The world was vibrant and alive. He could hear the subtlety of the wind passing through the leaves, the soft ruffle of the grass as the sheep grazed. He shifted his glance to the nearest tree. He gently pulled his hand down the bark, noticing every groove. His heart began racing. He pulled his arm all the way back and swung at the tree with all of his force. The tree shattered on the first blow. Shrapnel of wood spread outwards from the tree. The man was now staring at his hands, expecting them to be caked with blood and splinters. But there was nothing. His eyes then quickly darted from tree to tree. He began hitting all the ones nearby. By the time the darkness had fallen upon the land, he had gathered enough wood to build a village. He gathered his thoughts and began the construction of a minor lean-to. He rested his head on the grass beneath his shelter and slept through the night. Day 2.
Soon enough, it was
wait, what?
Soon enough, it was day.
Day 2, he awoke.
Yeah, no, that's not what that says.
Well, you have a different version than us.
Yeah, I think you edited yours to be longer. Ours is different.
Oh, shit. No, I'm reading the new Steve.odt.
Okay.
Whoops.
Do you want me to read this version?
Give me a second.
Because I think it looks like we were like, what the fuck?
We should probably start over.
Here.
I'll leave it in. It'll be
Okay.
okay. But, no, okay, I see. So this one only goes to day 9. I think that one goes to, day 14.
So it's from what I can tell, you went back and started editing it with your new
finished.
knowledge.
Yeah. So, okay, yeah. So the one you guys are on goes to day 12, right?
Here, let me go down. Trying. Where'd the mouse go? There we go. Yes, day 12.
So it looks like day 1 was still roughly accurate except for, the first part, right?
Yeah, we were reading and it was like, this seems like a lot of detail for what we're reading right now.
Okay.
I thought you were ad-libbing it.
That'd be cool if I was.
Yeah.
Alright, day 2, you start.
Soon enough, it was day. He stood from the hard ground and walked outside. He stretched and yawned, and took down the shack and prepared for a long day of work. He started making planks out of all of the trees he had knocked down on the previous day, and at around noon he had finished converting the wood into planks.
I'm sorry. It sounds like you're ad-libbing a little bit.
A little bit, yes.
Don't.
Okay.
We want to hear it as bad as it says.
Okay, alright. He then began building the base of his house. First, he placed some planks for the floor. He then set out a 10 meter by 10 meter square of planks. He built up on that, and in the end, it was a big house, especially since it was empty. By the time he had finished, it was sundown. So he made a door and set it up. Then he went inside, lay down on the floor, and thought to himself, I'll make a bed tomorrow. The night went by fast, once Steve had fallen asleep.
This is just terrible, but yes, continue.
Alright, day 3.
Day 3. Steve woke up, rolled onto his stomach, and pushed himself up. He yawned and walked over to the door and saw the sunrise through the trees. Steve made a sword out of wood. Then he stepped outside and began searching for materials to make his bed. He saw a lot of tall grass, but thought it would die and rot away if he packed it into a mattress. Steve set out to find something else, something softer. He walked in a single direction until he hit the edge of the forest. It was a large field full of grass.
Tall grass?
Full of tall grass. He looked around, amazed at how large the area was. Steve heard a strange sound in the distance. He did not recognize it. He pulled out his wooden sword, frightened of what might happen. He slowly walked over to where he thought the sound was, darting all behind the trees and hills on the way. The sound came once more, but he could hear it more clearly now. Ba, ba. Still confused, he steps closer, crouches down, and slowly pokes his head over the hill to see a large, fluffy, white creature. The creature looked at him. Every hair on Steve's body stood straight up, frightened. The creature looked not caring that Steve was there. Steve calmed down and walked over to pet it. He said to himself, wow, this would be perfect for a bed. He took his sword out, cut all the fur off, and ran home. Once back at the house, Steve grabbed some of the extra wood and made a bed. He then exclaimed, yes! A bed. I can really sleep tonight. He lay down to sleep. Also, the bed was so comfortable compared to the past few nights that he fell right asleep.
So let's just pause right there and have a discussion about the past few days here. First of all, cut off the fur, not the wool.
Yeah.
I noticed there's a distinct lack of commas.
Mm-hmm. I counted like 3 commas when I was reading.
God, this is terrible. We may read the new version afterwards, just because it looks like I added a lot more detail and wrote it generally better.
I think we should just keep it with this one.
Oh, no, we will, and then we'll go and read the other one.
Alright.
Other than that, I mean, first, it took him 3 days to make a bed. First of all, and he recognized a sheep earlier, and then suddenly
Did
forgot.
he really?
I'm pretty sure it said in here. Oh, it might be in the rewrite that I said that.
Yeah.
Apparently that sheep scared the shit out of him.
Well, I mean, imagine seeing an animal you've never even seen or heard before. You don't know what the fuck it is. You know? You don't know.
So
if
then,
it's hostile.
once it looks away, you just walk up to it and start petting it and say, this would make a perfect bed.
It's also, he used a sword instead of shears.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, should be a possibility, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Alright. Day 4. God damn it, Noah.
Just go. Just read.
3, 2. Day 4. The next day, he woke up again and walked over to the door. It was another bright and sunny day. He then heard an odd sound. It sounded like hooves. He opened the door and looked around his house. He saw a tall, green creature. Yes, Noah?
How would he know what hooves sound like?
He saw a tall, green creature. I want to remind everybody, I wrote this when I was in like 7th grade. So he thought that it would be like the white creature. Therefore, he walked closer and attempted to pet it. It slowly turned around, facing Steve, and then it hissed. Hiss. He turned and ran, fearing it was hostile. The monster followed him into the thick forest. Steve continued to run. He found a large tree and hid behind it. He turned slightly and peered around the edge to see if the creature had followed him. There was nothing there. Steve let out a sigh of relief and looked out to the other side. When he did, he said, "Clever girl." That wasn't what it said. When he did, he was face to face with the creepy monster. So close, he could smell its foul, sulfuric breath. He turned and jumped to get away, but had already hissed long enough. And right as he jumped, an explosion went off. Steve's ears were ringing. He looked back, and the creature was gone with the crater where it used to stand, a few meters deep. At the bottom of the crater, there was a hole. Steve walked into the crater and looked down into the hole carefully as possible, and saw that it was a large cave. So he ran home, forged a wooden pickaxe, and ran back to the cave. He mined as much stone as he possibly could and brought it home. Not long after that, he made a cheap stone pickaxe and went back to mining. Soon enough, he found coal, iron, and lots of it. Jesus Christ.
Oh my god.
He ran home and made a small furnace out of stone, burned the coal and smelted the iron. While the iron was smelting, Steve went to sleep.
Okay. When he woke the next day, he checked the furnace for his iron ingots, and they were all there. Day 5! When he woke, he checked the furnace for his iron ingots, and they were all there. What? So he forged a new iron sword and a shiny new pickaxe. He ran back to the mine. He mined a stair-like path 3 meters wide. I had to really try not to do that. Every once in a while, Steve would hit a vein of coal or iron and mine that out, then continue with the staircase. Once he felt like he was low enough, he just started mining in a straight line. While he was mining, he heard a mysterious sound. Plop, pop, pop. He continued to mine, until it got frighteningly loud. Then he hit the next until it got frighteningly loud. Then he hit the next area very carefully. No commas. As a rush of hot wind blew past Steve's face, he cringed. He shut his eyes as fast as he could. The brightness of the lake was so painful it temporarily blinded him. Once his vision reset, he walked towards it to get a good look around. On the other side of the massive lake, he saw something blue. So he slowly walked around the lake, mining into the wall when needed. Once he reached the other side, he swung his pick back behind him. He swung his pick back behind him, preparing to thrust it into the stone to get the blue object out. When he hit the blue object, it turned into a powder. He picked it up, stuffed it into it. I tried to touch the screen to scroll. Tiny bag and put it into his pocket, confused as to what it was. He continued through the mine in search of more iron and coal. After a hard day's work, he went home, smelted the iron, and threw the powder onto the floor and went to sleep.
You added an extra "and" there, which made the sentence not sound as great.
Yeah, it doesn't sound great to begin with.
I know, but it sounds better with one "and" instead of twos. It's he smelted his iron, threw the bag of powder on the floor, and went to sleep. Anyway,
I'll be right.
All right.
6.
Day 6. He awoke once more on the 6th day. He turned on his side and stared into the furnace at the still glowing coals. It was so mesmerizing that he fell back asleep for most of the morning. When he awoke the second time, he felt rested. He stood up, stretched, and walked outside, alert of the possible monsters. It was very hot out that afternoon when he woke up. He decided he did not want to go to the mine, so he dug a small hole. He went out just to find a small lake or a river. He crafted a bucket, filled it with water, and poured it into the hole. He just sat there and waited in the large puddle for a little while. The day was not very productive. He dug some sand and put it in the furnace. He reheated the coals and made some glass. He then sliced it into panes and made 3 windows for his house, one for each side.
Other than
the side of the door. So that he could see any future monsters. He then went to sleep again.
So
he cut the window.
Well, yeah,
he
because
sliced it.
Yeah, I mean,
it was probably still hot. Also, did not say once that lake he found underground was lava, just that it was bright.
Yeah, so the past 3 days, they were a little bit interesting. He met a creeper for the first time that happened to blow up into a cave.
I mean, that happens.
It happens.
I've had that happen.
I think that was based on a true story that happened to me in Minecraft, obviously not real life.
No, something blew up and you fell into a ravine.
Actually, I think this is before ravines?
Yeah, this is before horses even, which is why I had the hooves in there for the creepers, because I didn't think anybody would think horses.
Or, I mean, sheep have hooves too, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Yeah, I guess. But they don't have hoof sounds, they just make...
Also, creepers are basically silent.
Yeah, that's true. At this time, I didn't really feel like they were plants yet, because the game theory hadn't come out.
Yeah.
Because this is old as shit. I don't know when it was written, but I think it was like 2012.
I can probably guess by the stuff that you have in it and the stuff that you don't.
Yeah.
It's probably sometime before release, but after 1.7.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it was 2012 or 2011.
It probably 11 because 12 was post-release, I'm pretty sure.
Anyway, let's move on to day 7. Once more, he woke to begin the day. He picked up his newly forged iron sword and looked through the windows to see if there were any monsters. Today, when he looked outside, he saw a gigantic spider with a skeleton on its back. The spider was just walking around in the shade of the trees. Then it turned towards the house, and he realized the skeleton was holding a bow. He decided he'd go out and kill the spider, not realizing that the skeleton was still alive. Okay. So he ran out there with his iron sword and ran towards the spider. The spider did not care about him. The skeleton turned, drew back his bow, and prepared to fire. Steve kept running closer in order to take them out. He hit the skeleton in the skull, and the skull fell off. The skeleton fired at Steve. He broke the skeleton's arms, and it just fell over off the spider. He then jumped up and stabbed the spider in the head. It died instantly. He took the bones and bow from the skeleton and some string from the spider and went back home. How did he get the string? Yeah, let's move on. He ground out the bones into bone meal. He then made a hoe so that he could start a farm, realizing he was feeling hungry after 7 days.
Yep.
Damn it, I lost where I was.
Like
he then made a all right. He tilled some of the soil and placed seeds into the dirt, and then he put some of the bone meal into the dirt. The plants magically grew to full size.
Oh,
which was before that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Steve, obviously surprised at how he subconsciously knew what to do, began harvesting the wheat and planted some more seeds. Sadly, he was out of bone meal, so he just let it grow this time. He then went inside and cooked some bread from the wheat. He ate all 4 loaves of bread. He then went outside and mined more wood since he had finally run out of it. All of a sudden, a man zapped into existence in the forest right in front of him. Right in front of him. Steve jumped back and pulled out his sword. The man stood up. He looked confused at what happened. Steve walked over to him. The man jumped backwards in fright. Steve then said, while sheathing his sword, "No need to worry, sir. I came here to...
Okay, Kermit.
I came here the same way you did. Don't worry, I already have a house. You can join me." They both walked back towards the house. The man stayed a few paces behind Steve the entire walk. They walked inside and Steve made a second bed for him. The man lay down on the bed, but still did not speak. Steve was unsure if this man was mute or just confused. They both went to sleep, but right before bed, Steve said, "Tomorrow we will expand the house so it is less cramped." I don't know why I gave him that voice. The man just looked at Steve and nodded, then closed his eyes. Day 8.
I need to scroll down here for me. Day 8. This time, when Steve awoke, he stood up and walked over to the new hand, giving...
I'm sorry. Restart that, but don't add new words.
Walked over to the new man and shook him a little to wake him up. The man opened his eyes, looked up at Steve, and said, "Who are you?" Steve, slightly astonished, continuous sentence. Steve, slightly astonished by the man's voice being so similar to his own, replied, "I call myself Steve." The man, The man stood up and punched a giant hole in Steve's wall. Steve, with wide eyes, replied, "Why did you do that?"
I think it's more like, "Why did you do that?"
The man replied, "I thought we were expanding the building today." So Steve paused and then walked up to the wall and punched it as well.
Is he Broly? It's Broly and Kermit?
The 2 men worked together to take down the walls that Steve took so long to put up. He then took the materials, rebuilt the wall further out, grabbed some more wood, and added to the wall to make it full. They then took the materials, rebuilt the wall further out, grabbed some more wood, and then added to the wall to make it full.
I know, it's terrible. Just move on.
Steve moved the man's bed into the new part of the building, and then he then asked the man,
"What is your name?"
The man replied, "I don't have a name. If I do, I can't remember. My thoughts are vague." Steve thought for a little while and said,
"Why don't we call you Israfel?"
Israfel? Oh!
That was relevant at the time.
Yeah,
Wow.
It was. The man looked at him and said, "Nah, that doesn't sound like me, but it does sound familiar." Both men began thinking of other names.
"How about Nicola?"
Suggested Steve. The man shook his head. "No." Steve thought harder, and then he had an idea.
"Herobrine."
The man said, "That sounds good. I am Herobrine." Herobrine. They then decided that they were so tired that they just went to sleep.
So, before we continue, first of all, I like what we were doing there with the voices. So, in the future, I will be Steve, you're Herobrine, and you get to be whoever else shows up. I do believe there is one other talking character that comes in.
I'll point at you.
Yeah, so day 9.
Day 9. The next morning when Steve woke up, he noticed Herobrine was already up. Herobrine was staring out the window, perplexed at what he saw. Steve stood up and joined him, and looking out the window, Steve said, that green...
Hey. Oh, that green monster is highly explosive. I call them creepers."
Herobrine looked at him and said,
"Oh, I'm gonna go kill it."
Steve looked at him and said,
"It's dangerous to do that. Here, take this."
As he offered Herobrine his iron sword. Herobrine picked up the sword and walked out the door. Steve stared out the window, hoping his new friend wouldn't die. Herobrine walked right up next to the creeper, raised the sword and prepared to strike. The creature turned and said, Master, no, please spare me. I have a wife and kids. Don't kill me. Both Herobrine and Steve looked very confused. Steve walked out the door, expecting the creeper to be friendly. But the creeper saw him step out and yelled, Master, is your mortal army
an enemy?
Steve. Herobrine and Steve both looked at each other. The creeper noticed the confusion and said, Do you guys not remember what happened last time you roamed this planet? This happens every time. They both looked at the creeper and said in unison,
No, what happened?
The creeper then began the tale of what had happened. Steve had come running into the end. Herobrine was not far behind him. Once they got in there, Herobrine created a massive dragon that was black and purple. He called it the Ender Dragon. He then raised obsidian pillars from the ground, each with a crystal on top to heal the dragon. Steve pulled out his bow and arrow and shot every crystal, avoiding the dragon as much as possible. Once all the crystals were destroyed, Steve pulled out his diamond sword and swung at the dragon. After a few swings at the dragon, it raised into the air and light started to shine out of the dragon until it exploded, leaving a portal and an egg beneath it. Steve picked up the egg and jumped towards the portal. Herobrine grabbed him before he could jump in. The two brought it out, and as the island slowly started falling apart, they were down to one block of land left, and then that began to fall into the void as everything else had. The two continued to brawl. As they fell into the void, no one has seen them since. Steve looked at Herobrine. Herobrine looked at Steve. Steve said,
We were enemies.
Herobrine said,
But you have showed me such hospitality.
The creeper ran towards Steve, hissing as he went. Steve turned to run. Herobrine ran towards the creeper to stop him. His eyes began to glow white, and he could feel power rushing through his body. Lightning then struck the creeper directly, killing it. Herobrine's eyes faded back to the original color. He then walked over to Steve, hugged him, and said,
We shall never be enemies again. We shall work together. If it weren't for you, I would have been dead. Wait.
Steve looked at him and said,
Thank you, Herobrine.
They both went... they both went inside and got some sleep after this long day of new truth.
Okay.
This is so fucking weird.
So, I think I remember exactly when this happened. This was like nearly a week after the end was released.
Mm-hmm.
Holy
this is so bad.
shit!
Yeah, this places it squarely in beta 1.8 then.
Oh my god.
And it's about to get worse.
Oh
No,
shit!
is it a Herobrine X Steve fan fiction?
Yeah.
Oh
I mean, yeah.
no!
So there is one other talking character. I forgot the creeper even existed.
Yeah.
There is one other one, and you'll be that one as well. Because we get the two main ones.
Okay.
I figure that's only fair. Day 10. The next day, they both awoke and asked each other if the previous day had been a linked dream. Steve and Herobrine agreed to just leave it at that and went to work. Herobrine went into the mine and Steve got some more wood and food. While Herobrine was in the mine, he came across diamonds. Many times. He also found tons of iron, gold, lapis lazuli. That's not how I pronounce that. Lapis lazuli. And coal. Steve went out to the mine. He found more iron, coal, and of course, lava.
First time that's actually been said in the story so far.
Steve climbed back out of the mine and went home to go to sleep. He noticed Herobrine wasn't there and decided to wait for him. Steve watched out the windows for Herobrine, but nothing came. Other than creatures. Ones he had never seen before. Mainly a tall, slender creature. Actually, I think I started writing this story and then the update came out.
Yeah.
Because I think Endermen would have been mentioned beforehand and wouldn't have been called, the way they were. Anyway.
Wait, yeah, because they aren't called Endermen yet, are they? They weren't for the while.
Yeah, so they didn't exist yet at the point that I started the story, but while I was writing the story, they had come out. Anyway, where was I? Mainly a tall, slender creature. Frightened, he just waited inside for Herobrine. Herobrine, however, was doing just fine. Hundreds of the creatures surrounded him, chanting,
What?
Actually, let's all chant this.
Herobrine has returned.
Oh yeah, has returned.
Long live Herobrine.
He told the creatures,
Oh yeah, go and get me all of the iron, gold, diamonds, and redstone you can find.
why is redstone capitalized? The mobs just raised their hands and hooves as high as they could and dispersed into the world. After an hour, his stockpile was so massive, Herobrine could not have taken it home. So instead he took a little and ran home to the very worried Steve. He got inside and said,
Steve, you would not believe what I found today. Diamonds!
why is he country?
I don't know.
Steve replied with, oh wow, I didn't see you in the mine though. Herobrine just looked at him with no response and jumped onto his bed. Steve let out a long sigh of relief, then jumped into his own bed and said, good night, Herobrine. Herobrine replied,
And a good night to you, too.
this is so bad. Day 11. We're nearing the end because there's only 12 days, so.
Herobrine awoke before Steve. He got ready as quietly as possible and left the house. He went back to his stockpile, took the majority of it, and then went home so he could put it in their chests.
Which were never made.
But when he got to the door, Steve greeted him at the door. Steve said,
Where did you go, Herobrine?
Herobrine replied, I went to the mine. I see I got all these materials. Steve looked in the bag and said,
How did you get these? These pickaxes are all hanging on the wall. What?
The pickaxes are all hanging on the wall.
Oh, the pickaxes are all hanging on the wall.
Herobrine stepped back and said, Does it matter how I got them? As long as we have them? Steve walked up to him and set his hand on Herobrine's shoulder and said,
That isn't the problem, Herobrine. The problem is that you aren't being honest about it. I think the power has gone to your head. I know I haven't known you long, but I still care about you. I'm concerned about you.
Herobrine looked at Steve with sad eyes and replied, You don't think I can handle this power? I can do anything. I can have all the mobs do anything. They'll follow my every command. Steve sighed and said,
I know, Herobrine.
That voice cracked me. Holy shit.
I know, Herobrine. That's the problem. You're letting the power go to your head. You are changing not just in mind, but in appearance. Your eyes are still glowing. I am scared.
Herobrine dropped his bag on the floor and walked out the door, saying calmly, Goodbye, Steve. He then walked slowly and eerily into the forest. Steve sat at the window, hoping nothing bad would happen to Herobrine while he was out, and hoped that he would come back someday, realizing his changes. Meanwhile, Herobrine stood staring at a tree, thinking, Do I really want to make a house myself, or should I have my mob army do it for me? His eyes began to glow white, more vibrantly than they had ever before, and all the mobs in the nearby area went running towards him. Getting in their groups, creepers in the middle, zombies and skeletons on the left, spiders and endermen. Is that the first time they've been called endermen?
Yes.
Spiders and endermen, not capitalized, on the right. He then began speaking in a deep, frightening voice. I want a house! Scratch that! I want a mansion! Build it for me out of the most expensive materials! Make it look amazing! Make it shame Steve's house! Make it 256 meters tall! Make it have thousands of rooms! For all of my helpers there will be great reward! Now go! And so the mobs went to work.
Oh my god!
250.
The endermen and spiders grabbed blocks. Wait, spiders can't. Whatever. And transported them to the skeletons and zombies. Skeletons and zombies began building. Period. The creepers were the guards that made sure everyone was working. Slaves. They also dug the holes to bedrock for the building to be...
the creepers were digging. They were killing themselves.
To bedrock for the building to be
Kamikaze.
256 meters tall. Herobrine jumped into the air and suddenly began flying. He flew higher to get a good look at the building slowly being created. Hours later, Steve finally woke up. He stood up groggily and looked outside. This is a very long day.
I know.
It was very dark. He walked outdoors and looked up at the new thing in the sky, the gigantic building. Higher up than he could see. He ran towards it. He carefully stepped on the pressure plates that automatically opened the door. Oh, whatever. He ran in and saw hundreds of mobs. They all turned and stared at him. All of the skeletons drew back their bow. All of the zombies raised their arms. The spiders, no, they spiders and creepers and spiders.
That's not how they
creepers and spiders hissed. The Endermen, still not capitalized, opened their jaws extremely wide and let out a fierce howl. Meanwhile, Herobrine walked down the finely polished stairs in a new suit, obviously calmed down from before, and said, Do you like my new house? I have a room for you, if you choose to accept my offer. Steve took one look at Herobrine and said,
I would never want to live here. This isn't a home, this is a hotel.
Herobrine looked at him and said, At least come and see your room before you completely deny it. Steve said,
Fine.
And walked towards the stairs with Herobrine. Meanwhile, Herobrine told two of the Endermen, Get this man a suit! Pronto! They replied,
Okay, so pause here real quick. So, I recognize that it's all in capitals and spaced out and weird. So originally this was written in standard galactic alphabet, but I don't have that font installed on this computer.
Okay.
And so it's supposed to come off as a different language. So
yes.
Have fun with that.
Okay.
What size is he?
Herobrine said, Same as me. Tall and wide.
They
went to work making one of those. They made to work making one out of the finest stuff. Steve told them,
No, I don't need one. Stop working.
And they stopped and looked at Herobrine and he said, Wait.
No. This is Herobrine saying it in their language.
Oh.
Don't listen to him. I am your leader, and I say continue working.
And so they went back to work as normal. Steve looked up at them, then at Herobrine. Herobrine just said, Just let them work. They love it. And so they continued up the stairs, and Steve said,
You should get a faster way of travel. Stairs take a long time.
Herobrine looked at him and said, We'll get the best. We'll get the best we have looking for faster means of safe travel. Steve looked down at the floor in silence and just continued walking. They got to the top floor, and Herobrine said, Okay, we're on our floor. It has our offices and our rooms. Steve looked at him confused and said,
Offices?
Herobrine explained, Well, we just can't have a big building for no reason. I give mobs jobs. However, the creatures are not slaves. Of course, I do pay them quite nicely. But if you would join us, we could work together as equals. Both of us would lead the company. Steve said,
What company would this be?
Herobrine thought long and hard to think of a name and said, If you join us, it will be Steve Supply Co.
So that's actually a really great reference to an April Fool's joke that had just happened that year, I think.
Mm-hmm. Steve turned to face him and said,
Wait, where are we?
Steve.
Oh, yes.
What is the point of this company? What do we do?
Well, said Herobrine, we sell food and equipment to miners and mobs so that they don't have to go out and forge it themselves. They continued to walk down the hall and go see Steve's room. As they were walking down... Oh, what just happened? Where'd it go? As they were walking down, Steve saw a lot of propaganda-looking posters in a language he did not recognize. He assumed it was the same one that he had spoken to the Enderman. Spoken to the Enderman in. As the two men neared the end of the hall, sirens began wailing, and he saw two Endermen carrying a gurney running down the hall and take a turn. The sirens began to fade as they got further away.
I'm sorry, I'm just imagining that scene with the Minions where they have the little siren on their head, but it's just wee-woo.
As the two men neared the end of the hall... Oh, wait. They'd finally reached Steve's room. Herobrine turned to Steve and said, This is your room. There was a double bed and a canopy on... There was a double bed with a canopy on top. Paintings lined the wall. There was even redstone lamps in the ceiling. I think I missed a period. Okay.
I think I forgot to put in the end quotation.
There was a double bed with a canopy on top. Paintings lined the wall. There were even redstone lamps in the ceiling, past tense. Steve was amazed, just purely amazed at the elegance of the room, but he thought to himself,
Do I really want this? Do I really want to be rich? Do I want a work-free life?
Yes, you do.
He turned to Herobrine and said,
What's the catch?
Herobrine looked at him confused and said, Why would there be a catch? You are my brother. I would never harm or enslave you, Steve.
I like how he says enslave. Like, that's just...
Then Steve said,
Fine, I will work with you, but as soon as I see something I don't like, I'm out of here.
Herobrine nodded and then said, You've had a long day. Let's go get some rest. Steve lay down in his new bed and realized it was the most comfortable bed he had ever rested on. He fell asleep almost instantly.
Day 12.
Day 12, the final day.
Final written day.
Yeah.
Yes. When Steve awoke, he was so comfortable he was lethargic. Herobrine walked into the room and said,
Good morning, sleepyhead. You slept in.
Steve laughed.
What the fuck is going on here? This is an intro to things that I don't want to see.
I'm sorry.
What the fuck was that?
I had to laugh. That's what it says.
All right.
Sorry.
Continue. We're almost done.
Steve laughed and lay up in his bed. He then asked Herobrine.
What do we do for the company anyway?
Herobrine told him.
We just organize the work. I make sure that they will listen to you now. But you need to get But we have to get you a language class so that you can begin learning their language. You will only need 5 minutes to learn it all. The way they teach is different.
Steve stood up just as an Enderman walked into the room. The Enderman was carrying a folded suit. He looked at Steve, nodded his head, and Steve heard shoop, and all of a sudden And all of a sudden he was wearing the suit, and the Enderman took his clothes and walked away. Steve turned to Herobrine and said,
Creepy.
A creeper then walked into the room and said, You called me master. Herobrine turned to him and said,
No, sorry. Continue on. Also, do you have any more on what happened yesterday?
The creeper replied, Yes, I do. The creeper was just having a bad day, and the zombie was...
Oh, I think this is in Creeper.
Yes, I do. The creeper was just having a bad day, and the zombie was messing with him, and the creeper blew up. The zombie survived with minor injuries, and the creeper died. Damage was done to the building, but it has been completely repaired.
Thank you. You may go now.
And that's all that was written at the time.
Holy shit.
It was easily the worst story I think I've ever read.
Read or
but-
written? Or both?
Yes. Yes. So I actually have a list here of things that were supposed to happen on each day. So day 1, it says spawn in, get log, go to sleep. Day 2, finish the house. Day 3, sword, find sheep, shear sheep, make bed. Day 4, meet creeper, found cave, made pickaxe, mine coal and iron, made furnace, melt iron. Day 5, iron sword, iron pick, more money, more coal, more iron, saw lava, lapis lazuli. Day 6, slept later, bucket, pool, glass. That's all it says. Day 7, spider jockey, farm, bread, Herobrine. Day 8, take down walls and rebuild, new bed, Herobrine. Day 9, Herobrine meets creeper. Creeper doesn't fight. Backstory.
Backstory. Exposition!
Exposition overload.
Creeper murder-suicide on Steve. Herobrine shows true power and saves Steve. Sleep.
Sleep.
Day 10. Steve got food and wood. Haha.
Haha.
Oh my
No,
fucking
the
god.
haha was me, because he got wood.
Got it.
Herobrine
No, I
went
think
to the
I think that happened in the morning of the 12th day.
iron, gold, lapis, coal, etc. Steve went to mine. Iron, coal, lapis. Stephen went home.
I'm not in this story.
Went home. Herobrine wasn't there. Steve waited. Steve sees Enderman. Herobrine is surrounded by mobs chanting for him. Orders mobs to mine. Brings diamonds to Steve. Steve doesn't trust. Day 11. Herobrine leaves before Steve gets up. Attempts to return with materials. Gets caught in a lie. Herobrine leaves. Goes mad with power. Has monsters build him a mansion. More like a hotel. Steve witnesses large tower. Higher than he could see. Mobs get in attack mode. Herobrine in suit comes down. Herobrine orders suit, shows Steve around. And then the last line here, I think I'm going to change the ending, however. I don't quite like the way I did it. I don't think it is a very good story at the moment with a sudden rise to power and knowledge. It's pretty bad.
What do you mean that was the best thing I've ever read?
I did make an extended version that only goes to day 9. But the quality is significantly higher. He doesn't even get a bed until day 9.
Huh?
So it's a little bit more extended, way more information, way better detail, because I already read the first paragraph for you guys. It's like, the world is dark, it's a void, pure nothing. Like, it's just a little bit better. I don't think Herobrine even shows up yet. This is interesting, actually. On day 5, when he meets the Creeper, this is when we first learned his name is Steve, because I did recognize that nobody ever actually called him Steve until Herobrine showed up. Like, we just called him Steve. To be fair, the story's named Steve, but whatever. And this was after the game theory 1 came out, because it says, the plant-like creature walked towards him slowly and began hissing, Steve. I also started using ellipses here, so there's just a lot of ellipses.
Steve, like the Flight of the Conchords? Steve.
Yeah, so it's just random ellipses.
Oh, yeah.
And then he says to the Creeper, what does Steve mean? Why did that creepy thing say that to me? God, that creepy thing.
Did it not blow up?
I don't think so.
It just walked up to him and went, Steve! And then walked away.
Who would have taught you that preposterous
As it was hissing, it began to glow a bright white, starting at its core and spreading to its whole body. It expanded until it burst, letting out a violent blast that sent the man through his wall. He lay on his back, splinters of wood stuck in his back and wall. He passed out. I'm sorry. Splinters of wood stuck in his back and wall.
Huh.
Okay. Even though he went through the wall, but whatever. He passed
The
out.
other wall that he hit.
When he woke up, the splinters in his back had disappeared. However, the crater outside of his house and the hole in his wall were still there. He went to go investigate the crater left by the creature. He wondered to himself, what does Steve mean? Why did that creepy thing say that to me? While pondering the idea of the new word, he glanced down at a darker area of the crater. He examined it closer and found a hole into an underground cave. He jumped down the hole and walked around a bit. He found chunks of stone that had been painted a dark orange color from rust, and other chunks were matte black. The man traveled back to the surface and made a pickaxe to collect the materials. He dove back down and began mining away at the iron and coal. By the end of the day, he had filled up a few chests with the material and built a forge. He started burning the coal and melting the iron. He slept while the iron ingots cooled. Iron. I don't know why I said it like that. But
Holy fuck.
it looks like there's a lot more detail in it, so if you guys want to read that, we can.
No, I think this was, that was
We
quite
should
the
save that for a
experience.
second episode.
That is true. This is 47 minutes in, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, person coming to
Okay.
get me kind of soonish. Not for another half hour.
That's sad. Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you guys so much for listening to this absolutely horrendous story.
I think it was entertaining up until
Yeah.
Broly Brian turned into a suit.
Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, check out that bell icon, check out the Patreon, do whatever it is you want to do. I don't give a fuck. Have a good one.